Now we're coming up to everyone's favorite topic, how to give feedback to other people. And our method of giving feedback draws from quite a few feedback models, but we've added something that's different to it. It's called SBI-Fi, S-B-I-F-I, and it stands for situation, behavior, impact, future, and in-group. So we're going to talk about what each of these mean.
So the first part, the S, stands for situation. This is the when and where of the situation that you're giving feedback about. And when you're really specific and objective, it really helps that the other person knows what you're referring to and avoids future misunderstandings. So what you might want to do is say something like, during yesterday morning's team meeting, I saw ... whatever you're giving feedback about.
But you want to avoid generalizing things like you always or every time there's a meeting, because these are very broad general statements, always, whenever, every time, and they're very easy to disprove. So the other person you're giving feedback to, they might immediately be on the defensive and go, well, that's not true. That was that one time where ... and then you've kind of lost the moral high ground. Yeah. So remember to keep it really tight and specific, but also don't leave it too late. Don't say during last year's team meeting there was this one time. Nobody's going to remember.
The second component of the feedback model focuses in on the behaviors that you're actually giving feedback on. And here it's really important that you have actually observed the behaviors yourself, that it's not hearsay or somebody else talking about somebody else doing something else. So this avoids judgment and assumptions as well. So for example, you might say something like, during yesterday morning's team meeting, you interrupted me when I was speaking twice, and the data that you presented was incorrect.
You see, when you say something specific about someone's behavior like that, it can be verified by a third person. Imagine you had like a video recording of it. Somebody could say objectively, yeah, that person did interrupt twice and the data was incorrect. So it's not like an opinion. It's actually behavior that you've observed.
You want to avoid saying things like you never prepare for meetings and you're not focused on detail. And somebody else told me that you never seem to be paying attention, because this is not objective and it's actually quite unprofessional to speak that way.
The third component is impact. And that component is all about conveying to the person you're giving feedback to, what was the impact of their behavior? Some people can actually be quite clueless of the impact of what they've been doing or not self-aware enough to see it. So you might actually take ownership of your views and use I statements. So for instance, this is how it sounds. During yesterday morning's team meeting, you interrupted me when I was speaking twice. The data you presented was incorrect as well. I felt upset because it seemed to me like you weren't paying attention or giving the meeting the respect it deserved. Really important, the three words, it seemed to me. It seemed to me. That's 4 words. Okay, really important, the 4 words, it seemed to me, because it's conveying to the other person that it's not a judgment, it's just how I interpreted it. Imagine if I said, you weren't paying attention. The other person could say, yes, I actually was paying attention. But if you say, it seemed to me like you didn't pay attention, then it's much harder to argue with that, because that's how your experience was of the situation.
You want to avoid saying things like, everyone feels like you're not paying attention, or that the team morale is actually quite low because of how you're behaving at work.
Yeah, everyone actually is so demoralized because of you.
So again, these generalizations or accusations will not help the other person actually to change and grow and develop at work.
The fourth part of this model is about the future action you would like this person to take. Really important, because it's not just about like vomiting some feedback on them and like there's nothing you can do about it. It's like, in future, this is what I want to see, or this is what I might find helpful. So for instance, you could say, what do you think you could do differently next time?
This is actually a really useful way to figure out whether the other person has an understanding of what's not going so well, whether they have insight, and whether they're actually taking responsibility for what has gone wrong. For example, if they're saying, oh yeah, I actually realized that I should be maybe listening more in team meetings and not interrupt so much and make sure that the data is correct, they're actually owning it already. And then you may not have to intervene so much. But perhaps for a more junior person or somebody who doesn't quite see their shortcomings, you may have to be much more clear on what you're observing and what you would like to see moving forward.
Yeah, and of course, if you're a manager, sometimes if you ask that person, like, so what do you think you could do about this in the future? And then you get nothing in return. You might even want to say, well, why don't you go off and reflect for a couple of days and we'll meet back again on Friday and discuss what you've come up with. Because you don't want to just be giving people the answers all the time. You also want them to do some work and some reflection.
Yeah, and also research has shown that if they're coming up with solutions themselves, they're much more likely to stick to them and own them rather than being told what they have to do. You want to avoid things like, just go home and think about this. What you did was quite terrible, right? It doesn't actually offer a way forward and positive problem solving.
Yeah, and if people don't see a way forward, then they tend to feel kind of disengaged, like, oh, there's nothing I can do, so why bother?
Yeah, and of course you might ask other good coaching questions like, what else could you do? What else might be a solution to really come up with a whole array of options for the person and for yourself.
The final part of this model is in-group. And we are all about in-grouping here. What this means is that making somebody feel they're part of your tribe and you're all in this together. That sends a really powerful motivational message to them that you believe in them and you care for them. So for example, it sounds a bit like this. I'm giving you this feedback because I'm committed to your growth. And we're on the same side. Your contribution is so valuable for this team, or, our partnership is super important to me, right? So there's that sense of, hey, we're doing this together. And you might even want to say, like, is there anything that I should know about how I could better support you? Or do you have any feedback for me as well? So that, you can give them the impression that, or the idea that you're really there to help them.
You want to avoid saying things like, well, I'm actually not quite sure if you're ever going to get there. You're the only person in the team that's causing these kinds of problems. Because that, again, separates you out. It puts that person in that group and you're with the rest of the team, makes them defensive, makes them feel disengaged. And it's really not what you want to see happen at work.
Yeah, so those are the 5 steps: situation, behavior, impact, future action required, and in-grouping.
Yes. Feedback is so important. We're going to give you more details on what to do preparing for the feedback and what to do afterwards in our next segment.